What if the secret to a meaningful life wasn't some big, complicated secret at all? What if it was just 3 simple stories? Well, today we're diving into one of the most famous commencement speeches of all time, and we're going to break it down into its 3 core lessons. It's all about connecting the dots, love and loss, and, yep, the power of remembering you're going to die. All right, let's get into it.
And that's exactly how it starts. No big, fancy words, no complicated ideas, just a simple, direct promise. Just 3 stories. You know, it's such a brilliant way to get an audience to lean in. Because the biggest truths, they're usually hidden in the simplest stories, right?
So this first story, it's all about trust. Not just blind trust, but trust in the messy, unpredictable moments of life. It's about believing that all the random, confusing dots will somehow, someday, connect into a picture that makes sense. But how do you actually do that when you're right in the middle of the chaos?
Well, the speaker's own life kicked off with a huge twist. His biological mother was a young grad student, and she had one non-negotiable rule. Her son had to be adopted by college graduates. So a lawyer and his wife were all set to adopt him. But then, at the very last second, they decided they wanted a girl. So a call goes out in the middle of the night to another couple on a waiting list, his future parents. Hey, we've got an unexpected baby boy, do you want him? Of course they said yes. But the story doesn't end there. His biological mom only agreed to sign the papers when they promised, absolutely promised, that he would one day go to college. A promise that would define the next 20 years of his life.
So 17 years later, he keeps that promise. He goes to college. But he kind of naively picks a school that's almost as expensive as Stanford. And reality hits him like a ton of bricks. He has no idea what he wants to do with his life, and he's just watching his working-class parents' entire life savings get completely torched on his tuition. So he makes this terrifying decision, one that probably looked totally insane to everyone else. He decides to drop out. And he just had to trust that somehow it would all work out.
Now let's be clear, this was not some romantic, find-yourself adventure. The reality was gritty, it was harsh. He didn't have a dorm, so he was sleeping on the floor in his friends' rooms. He was scrounging for food money by returning old Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits. And every Sunday night, he'd walk 7 miles across town just to get one decent hot meal at the local Hare Krishna temple. This was a really tough, unglamorous time.
But right in the middle of all that struggle, something incredible happened. Dropping out, as hard as it was, gave him a gift he never expected: total freedom. The second he was out, he could stop taking all the boring required classes and just follow his curiosity. He could drop in on any class that looked interesting, and the one that really caught his eye? Calligraphy, the art of beautiful lettering. And what's so fascinating here is that he did this for no practical reason at all. Think about it. He wasn't trying to get a job in design or pad his resume. He just did it because he found it beautiful. He thought it was historical and artistic in a way that science couldn't really explain. At that moment, this skill had absolutely zero practical application for his future. Or so he thought.
And here it is. This is where the dots slam together. A full decade later, when he's designing the very first Macintosh computer, all that useless knowledge about fonts and spacing comes flooding back. It became the soul of the Mac's design, making it the first computer with beautiful, elegant typography, the kind we all just take for granted on our screens today.
So what's the big lesson here? It's that you have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, karma, call it whatever you want. You just have to believe that the dots will eventually connect down the road. Because having that faith is what gives you the courage to follow your heart, even when it takes you way off the main road. And, as he puts it, that has made all the difference.
Okay, so from trusting the journey, we pivot to the second story. And this one takes a much darker turn. If the first story was about having faith when the path forward is a total mystery, this one is about what happens when that path leads you to a crushing, very public failure. It's a story about love, loss, and the incredible power of having to start all over again.
He was one of the lucky ones, you know? He found what he loved to do early. At just 20 years old, he and his friend Woz started Apple in his parents' garage. And in 10 short years, it exploded from just 2 guys into a $2 billion company with 4,000 employees. They had just released their masterpiece, the Macintosh. He was 30 years old, on top of the world. And then, he got fired.
I mean, how do you get fired from the company you started? It's a wild question. Well, as Apple got bigger, he hired a really talented guy to help him run the company. But eventually, their visions for the future started to clash. A power struggle kicked off, and when it came to a head, the board of directors, they sided with the other guy. And just like that, at 30, he was out. Not just out, but very publicly out. The very thing that had been the center of his entire adult life was just gone. He felt like he'd failed everyone, like he'd let down a whole generation of entrepreneurs. The humiliation was so intense, so public, that he actually thought about just packing up and leaving Silicon Valley for good. But then, slowly, something started to shift in his mind. He realized that getting fired, as awful as it was, had an upside he never saw coming. As you can see here, the crushing weight of being successful was suddenly lifted, and in its place was this feeling of lightness, the lightness of being a beginner again, free to be creative without all that pressure. And that feeling of lightness, it kicked off one of the most creative periods of his entire life. He started a new company called Next. Then he started another little company you might have heard of, Pixar, which, went on to make Toy Story, the world's first computer animated movie. He fell in love and met his wife, and then, in a crazy twist of fate, Apple ended up buying Next, bringing him right back to the company that kicked him out.
The lesson here is just so important. Sometimes life is going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. In those moments, he says the only thing that's going to pull you through is loving what you do. So his advice is simple, but powerful. Keep looking for your passion. In your work, in your relationships. Whatever you do, don't settle.
So we've covered trusting the journey and persevering through failure by loving what you do. This third and final story is easily the most profound, and honestly, maybe the most uncomfortable. It's about the one thing we all try our best not to think about: death. But he argues that remembering you're going to die is the single best tool you have for living a life that is truly yours. For 33 years, every single morning, he'd look in the mirror and ask himself this one question. And whenever the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew he had to change something. It's such a simple but incredibly effective filter for your life's biggest decisions. I mean, just imagine what would change for you if you asked yourself that every day. This wasn't just some abstract idea for him. It became terrifyingly real when he was diagnosed with cancer. A scan showed a tumor on his pancreas. The doctors told him it was the incurable kind, and that he should expect to live for maybe 3 to 6 more months. Their advice was blunt: get your affairs in order, which is basically doctor speak for prepare to die. That whole terrifying experience just crystallized this one core belief for him. Remembering that you are going to die is the most liberating tool you have. Why? Because it frees you from the trap of thinking you have something to lose: your reputation, your pride, your money. As he says, you are already naked. Everything is stripped away. There is no reason not to follow your heart. Because when you're looking death right in the eye, almost everything else just dissolves. All those external expectations from other people, all that pride we carry around, all our fear of embarrassment or failure, it just vanishes. And all that's left is what is truly important. And this leads him to this stunning, totally counterintuitive reframing of death. It's not an enemy. He calls it life's single best invention. It's life's change agent. It's the force that clears out the old to make way for the new. It's the ultimate reminder that your time is limited, so don't waste a second of it living someone else's life. He wraps up his whole speech, not with his own words, but with a farewell message from a magazine that was like a Bible for his generation. It was called the Whole Earth Catalog, kind of like Google in paper form, filled with all these amazing tools and big ideas. On the back cover of its very last issue, there was a photo of an open country road at sunrise, and beneath it were these 4 simple words. It was the magazine's final message to the world, and it became his wish for the graduating class, and for all of us, really. Stay hungry, always be learning, never be satisfied. And stay foolish. Be willing to take risks, to follow your heart, to try things that other people think are crazy. It's a perfect call to a life of courage, curiosity, and endless possibility.